to go ahead and start the recording, and we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to discuss is just a little bit of housekeeping. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. Okay. Hopefully you can see the screen here. I'm looking at the schedule for the next couple of weeks. Next week is spring break. Yes, I'm sure many of you are applauding this wonderful period during the semester to get some things either caught up or just to get some type of R&R because it's been a full semester. So enjoy your week next week, not having to post anything or look up anything. But come the next week, we will get started again, but we will be working on reviewing for the final exam, not final, midterm exam. Yeah, we're not ready for the final yet. I bet you some of us are probably ready for the final, like for this to be over, but I don't think so. I think the information that we're reviewing in this course and in this textbook is quite useful and illuminating and engaging. So with that in mind, we do have a midterm exam coming up, and we will do that, I believe. Let's go look at the Blackboard here. And let's go into the modules and module 2. So week 8, we'll be preparing for the exam. Week 9 will be the midterm exam, but the midterm exam will be the next week, week 10. So it will not be due until it won't be available until after March 13th. So at 6 a.m. So that's when you can start taking the exam. The review information will appear starting on the 5th. So if you so decide to study for the exam during spring break, you can, but you don't have to. Of course, you can take the week to study for the midterm, and then take the midterm before that Sunday that it is due, and the exam will be due. We look here at the due date; it'll be due 3/19 by midnight. So. And the 19th should be a Sunday. Yep, Sunday the 19th. So really we have next week, which is spring break, and then you'll have the entire week to study and take the final, not the final, the midterm exam. If you have questions about that or about the review, let me know. But I don't plan to put a review up. The review is pretty simple. We're going to be studying or reviewing or looking at the whiteboards for chapters 1 through 7, and anything that we've discussed in class, and anything that is in the forum, in any of the chapters. All of that is open for use in the midterm exam, or will be reflected as part of the midterm exam. So with that said, the midterm exam is taken online, so you don't have to come to class to take it. Those of you who are in the online section, and those of you who are here in the live section, you all take the midterm exam online, open book, open notes. Just the questions are going to be difficult, so you're going to have a certain amount of time to get it done. But if you've reviewed the material and made yourself aware of the material, you should be able to get through it just fine. If you don't make a good grade on the exam, that's quite all right, because I'm going to give you a chance to edit the midterm exam. If I could stop saying final exam, it'd be great. But if the midterm exam, I will allow you to go in and justify your answers with cited information. And so if you made a mistake, I'll give you a chance to correct those mistakes, because what's important to me is that you understand the material and that you have something to take away from the material. Any questions so far about that? Let's go back and look at the, I don't see anything in the, oh, good. All right, so what we'll do now is I'll stop sharing the screen, and we will start sharing again the PowerPoint. Start with the issues. Do I have a volunteer from our table of live students to give us the opener with respect to the issues, recommendations, and justifications? Okay.
I said in chapter 7, the issue of art is who does not know how the manufacturing company IDK is using the IR project has benefited IDK. The profit has cost IDK $3 million, but has not produced any business benefits that aren't worthy enough to keep around. He is thinking of firing the manufacturing company to use a better one for the IR project.
Okay, and what should he do? Yes.
Martin should discuss with other people in the project to determine if manufacturer's growth continuing to use. You should also have a meeting with manufacturers to see what they have to say about their work for IDK. You should also take this information and determine if Martin should fire manufacturers or continue to use them for the IR project.
Okay, and how do we justify those recommendations?
On pages 110 through 115, Martin has a meeting with Tyler Gordon to discuss the IR project using manufacturers. Martin should have a meeting with manufacturers to discuss their work with IDK. Ask how Ruben feels about firing manufacturers, and have a discussion with the leadership team on their thoughts about firing.
Okay. So all of those are definitely in line with the instincts and the impressions that were given from the pre-cases I've seen so far, and I've also noted them on the whiteboard file. So yes, indeed, Barton is familiar with the IR project, but does not know its project. He knows its purpose. He doesn't know why they're upgrading all of the infrastructure. He just knows that it's a very expensive line item on the budget, and he's wanting to know more. And of course, so is the board. NetFX is being paid to do nothing to help the company. Well, I don't know. We'll discuss that a little further, but it sure certainly seems that way. Barton was a little blindsided with the IR project at the board meeting, and possibly, I think he knew about it. I think he just probably was hoping that it wouldn't be brought up. It is a big line item, and the problem is I think he wasn't expected to discuss it in detail, as he kind of got a little behind the ball there. And then, of course, as Sarah mentioned, the $3 million price tag with no definitive results from NetFX. And what's more important is that nobody has noticed or taken issue with that until now that the board has changed. And so these are all the issues that I saw come up in the pre-cases so far. Let's take a look at what you all recommended. Barton should prioritize research into precisely what went wrong into the NetFX project and the relationship. He should not repeat the mistakes that were made on the first attempt at the infrastructure rebuild, or the rebuild, or I think they call it something, the infrastructure reinvestment or rebuild, I guess is just as well here. Understand the, NetFX should be fired, and understand the scope of the project and what IBK needs from their next consultants if should NetFX be fired. Ruben should come up with 2 teams and finish the project in chunks. And Tyra and Ruben should be the leader of the project after NetFX is dismissed. So let's take a look at those justifications. One justification, of course, is that $3 million price tag to NetFX, and they have nothing to show for it to date. Barton states the project is going nowhere. It needs a shakeup. They haven't delivered value. And remember, we talked about value in the past in terms of the value of IT and the cost of IT. And we'll talk a little bit about value today in terms of the competes and qualifiers. We didn't really get into that last week, but I want to get into that this week. It's also mentioned in this chapter, so don't feel like you have to jump to the other chapter. It's mentioned in both. Barton does not give Leopold at NetFX the 3-hour meeting to make its case. He thinks it will only be a sales pitch for going forward and not a status update. And those are the justifications for some of the recommendations. Just some other issues and notes. CIOs are constantly bombarded with attempts by companies like NetFX that are all flash and no substance. The fact that the lead tech guy from NetFX was shut down by its CEO was very telling, and Barton's experience to call BS when he sees it. You all did great to see this dilemma. It's too bad Davies did not see it, or maybe he did and just jumped ship, or at least did a duck and cover like Barton did in the meeting, and it just didn't work out. He just got fired because he spent $3 million and had nothing to show for it in his department. Questions like this must be asked and explored with this type of extreme sunk cost scenario. We'll talk about sunk costs in a minute. So let's take a look at it. See if I'm missing a page here. In terms of the other issues and notes, let's talk a little bit about NetFX and how it applies to what we talked about last week when it comes to project management. Do you think there is a project manager? And you can show that by clicking the raise hand feature in Blackboard. How many think there is a manager? To raise your hand, all you have to do is just hit the little little hand icon, the little guy raising the hand at the bottom in the middle. So does nobody think? Or you can also add, was there a project manager related to NetFX? Nobody? Indeed, there was a project manager. I'm assuming that either you don't know or you didn't think that there would be in this case, because, you know, the Davies just hired this company and boom, the thing just shows up, right? The changes just automatically poof are just made. Well, no, that can't happen. You actually have to have a project manager from within the company. And the name of the project manager was, let's take a look. As a matter of fact, let's take a look. Yeah, I'm just going to take a minute to take a look. I remember the person's. I don't know why I just forgot the person's name. Huh? Palmer. That's it. Yeah, that's right. Palmer. He was the project manager. And what was interesting about Palmer? Does anybody remember? He was IVK's in IT. He was IVK's point person, and he's the one who hired NetEffects. And those of you who are in the internet world, you can also chime in either by unmuting your mouse or unmuting your mic, or you can just type something in the chat. But what was unique about Palmer? I just, for some reason, couldn't remember his name, and I forgot to write it down. Was Palmer part of the IT department? More importantly, was Palmer an IT infrastructure specialist? No. Palmer came from what area? If he wasn't in IT, what was his specialty? Yeah, probably not. It was probably somewhere in the business or financial office. So he was the person who was in charge of procurement. We'll talk about procurement, but he's the one who brought on NetEffects. And the problem there is he knew a lot about, based on the book description, he knew a lot about procurement, and he knew a lot about making deals and getting financing and those types of things. But when it came to the details of the infrastructure and how to execute, he left that up to the consultants, the vendors. So he didn't even know how to have oversight of the project, because all he knew was that, he had this line item, put in a rack mount server, but he didn't know what a rack mount server was and how it should work and who should be doing it and if the deliverables working right. Having someone like Palmer as the project leader or the project manager was not a good decision. Now, he could have been on the project team for sure, because you need someone on the project team that can do the financing and suss out all of the details of this infrastructure project. But you need someone who is very familiar with infrastructure. In this case, it's an infrastructure rebuild or upgrade, essentially. And they don't even know why there's a need. There was a little document that that another consultant provided IVK. They came in and looked at all the systems and said, hey, you need an upgrade. But it really didn't say why. It's just Palmer was just given the document and he was just said, okay, I'll just get taken care of. And the problem is you need an IT project manager for this type of project because it's infrastructure related. It has very specific needs and skill sets that are not available anywhere in the company except in IT. Now you have specific skill sets in IT, but you only have a certain number of people. So that's why they decided to hire this NetEffects company. The problem is the oversight was Palmer, and he doesn't know what questions to ask. He doesn't know how to take NetEffects to task to make sure that each aspect of the project is being completed. He just gave it to them and just hoped that they would get it in on time. So that's a little bit about the project manager. So the first problem is that the project manager was a bad choice for project manager. The second problem is remember our triangle from last week. We had the costs, we had the scope, and we had the time. And those of you who are in the online, you can refer to the triangle from the video if you took notes from last week. But somewhere along here, the scope might have changed. Because if you're not watching out, if you're not in constant communication as a project manager with your consultant, with NetEffects, what's going to happen here? If NetEffects is responsible for getting the project done, they're getting billed or they're billing by the hour. So the slower they make this, or the more complicated they make the scope, or the things that need to be done to make the project happen, the more money they make, right? So if nobody's watching them and taking them to task, the scope's going to get bigger. We talked about scope creep, and this is what caused the balloon. And scope creep is a real problem. And of course, when you have scope creep, that increases, then of course your costs are going to increase, and your time's going to get all out of whack because the project's never going to get finished, right? So NetEffects, that is, they took advantage of IVK and their lack of oversight and caused the project to go way out of scope, caused the costs to go way up, and of course the timeline to not be hit, because obviously the thing should have been done already, and of course your quality in here it's just no good. Now let's take a look at the live session questions. Go back here. Let me turn this off and jump into the share the screen again. So we're going to take a little bit of time to answer some questions, 5 or 6 questions. And I want all of you to do this. And I want you to maybe pull up a Word file or some type of note-taking, because I want you to turn this in today. What you can do is I'll put in a little assignment. But what I want you to do is answer these questions while you are in class. I want everybody to answer all of the questions as best you can in the next 20 minutes. And after that, we will visit at least some of these questions, and we'll talk about them in detail. And I want you to take notes on these, because some of these questions might end up on the midterm exam. And so this is a very important chapter. This is where a lot of ITers get fired because they cannot manage a project. And just about everything in IT is a project now. You either maintain something or it is a project. So the first question is, what is procurement and how is it used in an enterprise? The next thing I want you to look up is water competes in qualifiers. Now, this is in the book, in the last chapter and this chapter. You can find it, or you can certainly look them up on the Google or on the internet, but it might take you a little bit longer. This depends on, if you read the chapter, you're going to be able to go right to it. If you didn't read the chapter, then it's going to take you a little longer. And then ask or answer the question, what are some tech competes you could give or you could add to yourself to give you an edge in the workforce? So I'm helping you define what a compete is in that third question, okay? So it kind of tells you, but I want you to see, try to apply a compete to your own personal life. and think about some examples that would give you an edge if you were to work in IT. And if you're already working in IT, what would give you an edge? And if you don't know anything about IT, then think about whatever your job you're in. What kind of technology would help you do your job better than the person standing next to you? Okay, that's that question. And then number 4 is, what is the IR project? What's causing its imminent failure? And we kind of talked about that. I'm going to leave the stuff that we talked about on the board here. Those of you, again, you can find, if those of you who are on the internet, you can find the little triangle anywhere. Just look for cost, scope, and time project management triangle. There's hundreds of them out there, and that's what I'm referring to when I talk about the triangle. But what's causing its imminent failure? Is it scope? Is it cost? Is it time? What is it? I want you to actually write that down. And that may be a question, maybe even an essay question on the midterm. And then we have sunk costs. What are they, and how do they play into the net effects drama? And I want you to look all of those up, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do that. So at 25 after, 3:25, we'll come back and try to answer a few of these, okay? And and the online users, or the people out in the internet world, you can of course type in the chat, but I would suggest you still write everything down in a Word file or something, and I will put up a little an assignment for you to upload that file to before the end of the day. When you do that, it is going to be 2 points extra credit on your discussion this week. So everybody who does and fills out and answers these questions and sends them to me will get extra credit for showing up today and being part of this live activity. Let me go back to the questions here. There we go.
You want us to turn it in paper or do it?
I want you to do it. I just open a Word file, and then later on I'll have an assignment. I can't really do it right now. Actually, I'll just turn this computer on and I'll put up an assignment real quick in Blackboard for you to upload it to. I meant to have, and that was my fault, I meant to have a common PDF, everybody, or common Word file everybody could write the answers into, but I forgot to do that, and that's my fault. So I'll give you extra credit for the extra effort. Just real quick, I have, if you look up on the screen, I have added the live session 13 answers for the bonus. All you have to do is click on that link and upload your file. And the questions are also there. You need to do that before midnight. I would appreciate you doing it before you leave today, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Again, it's for extra credit, but I think it will also be helpful. All right, that should be plenty of time to get at least something down. And you can continue to work on this after we have the discussion and turn it in. You know, again, it just needs to be turned in by midnight, but if you want to go ahead and turn it in, that's fine. So you don't have to remember. So let's take a look at the first question, which is what is procurement and how is it used in an enterprise? Anybody want to take that one on? Do I have to start picking people? Oh, I don't want to pick on people. Hey, Shadiria, tell us all about procurement and how it is used in an enterprise. Your understanding of what you found. It may or may not be what we're looking for, but we'll work with it.
Procurement is a strategic process that involves the acquisition of goods and services.
Yep, it's the acquisition of goods and services. Right, very good. It's basically a purchaser for a company. That's it. Bottom line, they buy things for the company. Every company, specifically large, mid-level to large enterprises, massive enterprises, they all have procurement departments. Those are the people who go out and get the quotes on whatever it is the company needs. A manager may ask for a type of system or cars or what have you, whatever they've decided the company needs in terms of the budget and that drives the mission forward, the objectives forward for the company. You're going to have a procurement department, and they are going to, again, research whatever it is the business side or the management decides they need. And if they've done a good enough job to convince the CFO, which usually signs off on all of these things, then it's up to the procurement or the purchasing department to acquire those items. And that's important because that's really what Palmer was in this instance, in this chapter. He was essentially, they made him the project manager, but really he was the procurement manager. He's the one who did the deal, got the financing, went out and found whatever it is they needed, found net effects, what have you. So he was really the procurement manager, but not the project manager. It should have been just the procurement manager, and stuck with it, stuck with that, and have someone else be the project manager. Number two, what are competes and qualifiers? Morgan.
From what I found, qualifiers are investments that a company can make that can basically keep them in the, how do I want to say that? Like in business. It's basically just what keeps them functional.
That is a what now?
What keeps them functional?
Well, no. What was the term? Competes or qualifiers?
Qualifier.
Okay, qualifier. You're right. Okay.
And competes are investments that elevate a company's standing. So things that can increase that company's value overall financially.
Yes, financially, but why do they use the word compete?
Because they are at that point in competition with other companies that have similar standards.
Good, good. That's what we want to focus on. When you talk about a compete, we're talking about adding something to the company that makes that company more valuable than its competitors. So anything that you can buy, acquire, build, whatever feature, add to the company that gives it an edge in the industry, that is a compete. A qualifier is simply something the business needs to stay alive, to keep moving. It's just a cog. It's just something that keeps the business moving. It's just based on business need. What example does the textbook provide on that? For IVK. I mean, why would Martin be looking for competes and qualifiers? And would the IR project be a compete or a qualifier? Let's just put it that way. That way you don't have to go through the book. Just say yes or no. Which one would you think the IR project. If it's an upgrade, it would be a compete. How would it be a compete? Let's just go down that road. Let's look at it from both angles. Let's look at it as a compete. How would IR for this company, which is essentially probably something like an E-Trade or something like that, type of stock brokerage type of company, would that help them compete more in the industry? Or would it just be something that they need to keep moving, to keep the status quo, or to keep up with growth? Which, you think?
I would say that maybe it's supposed to be a compete, but because of the way that this particular project is gone, it's not really qualifying as a compete.
It's not qualifying as a qualifier at this point, is it? Right? The company's in desperate need. And why is there a desperate need? If we go back to the financials, back in chapter 1, the company has grown tremendously in the last 3 years. So they've really outgrown their systems when you think of it in those terms. And the reason why they needed more system space is to just to handle the growth, the number of customers and the number of transactions. And you need a good IR system. So that begs the question, would it actually be, since it's a brokerage, would it actually be better for them would it be a compete? If they could be faster and get results faster and buy stocks and bonds and securities faster than their competitors, would that make it a compete if it worked? Yeah, it would. So you have to think of things whenever you are a CIO. You're not a project manager. As a project manager, you just see just that project, and that's your scope, and that's that's the world you live in. But when you're a CIO or a CTO or some type of C-level exec related to IT, or a manager even, you have to think in terms of how this thing is helping the company. Just because I've had a CEO contact me at 9 o'clock at night, they saw something on CNN, saw this new technology, and they were like, "Oh, we got to have this. This is so cool." And that's all the CEO said. It's just really cool, and we've got to have it. And do you buy the system? Do you put in the system because the CEO says, "I want the system"? Or do you push back a little bit and say, well, how's it going to make, and you have to do that as a CIO, you have to do that. You actually have to push back a little bit. You have to be the one to say, hey, well, let me look at it. And you can be diplomatic about it, but let me look at it. And if it can add a competitive edge to our company, then yeah, let's look really seriously look into it. But if it's something that's just going to be something that they're going to show off to their friends on the golf course, whatever, then maybe it's not something that maybe could just be a qualifier if you need to upgrade these systems anyway. If we're going to do it, we might as well use this. And then there's some feasibility questions that can be answered and work downstream. But the idea here is to think about your projects, think about everything that you are purchasing in IT and everything that you're doing in IT on the governance side as well as on these project side, that you have to think of them in terms of competes and qualifiers. Are they going to fit one of those two areas? And which one do you think would be better for the company long term? A compete? Huh? A compete, right? Because if you're competing and you have an edge in your market and you're growing your business and you're growing market share, the compete is always any IT projects that can be truly classified as competes are better than simple qualifiers, which are based on business need. And sometimes managers want something faster because it just gives them less of a headache. But technically, it probably is not even needed. It may reduce a little bit of friction, but is the cost of having somebody work some overtime justified against such a high price tag? So, I mean, if you pay somebody 100,000, or you pay a group of employees 100,000 more a year on that group, and the system is going to cost $1 million in that first year, what do? You don't buy $1 million system when you can pay $100,000 in overtime, right? Now, there's going to be a lot of grumbling, right? There's going to be friction, you know, and all of that. But you don't buy $1 million. You just not, if your payback, and we'll talk about these payback scenarios in terms of ROI, or return on investment. We'll talk about those later in the course. But right now, we're just talking about competes and qualifiers. A compete, you should be able to say, we're going to make this much money in this many years, and the ROI is going to be this much money. So we're going to pay $1 million over the course of 5 years, and we're going to make over the course of 5 years $10 million, right? So $1 million produces $10 million, right? So heck yeah. So that's we're running out of time, so I know I really drove that one into the dirt. And we'll probably talk about a few more of these next week, or not next week, but the week after the exam, because we'll probably need to do a little bit of a review anyway. So that's enough about the competes and qualifiers. Let's see. The one that I really wanted to ask you is, and this is more of a rhetorical, but I'm hoping you wrote something in the file. What are some tech competes that will help you personally? Right? That'll give you an edge against somebody standing next to you in your job, or in a class, or in anything, really. You want to show off against your brother or sister, you know, your family, you know. Just think about that. Think about whenever you buy a phone, or you buy some type of service, think about how, in terms of competes and qualifiers, is it just going to make your life easier? Is it something you really need? Is it something that's really going to propel you going forward? Can you buy that new computer and it give you an edge, and you be able to produce something that somebody else, either in your family or at your job, they can't do? Because sometimes, I've always done this. I've always purchased my own, when I get an idea about something and how I could make my job easier, I would go out and personally buy something that would make my job easier, and that would help me compete against other coworkers, right? And you don't always have to rely on your company to buy things for you to make your job easier. Sometimes, to save your sanity, sometimes you could, if you see something that could help you compete and help you do your job better, so that you can be seen by upper management as somebody who's a producer, a mover, a shaker, then it's probably worth doing it, because you might end up making more money in the long term, just by, and also you learn something new. Whenever you buy something new, you're going to have to learn how to use it, and you're going to learn something new. So there's always this investment that you can make in yourself. So think about things that are competes personally. This class is about you, because you're not going to step into a CIO position. I'm sorry, it's just not a reality. Whenever you walk out of with your degree, you're not going to walk up to Denny's and say, I want to be your CIO, right? You're just not going to do it, right? But you can take this knowledge and use it personally, and promote yourself by these concepts that we are discovering in this chapter. Right, and then let's see here. What are some tech competes? What is the IR project? We already know what the IR project is, but I wanted you to just have that written out and have that in the back of your mind. What's causing system failure? We talked about that a little bit. Sunk costs, that's the last one, and then we can go. Sunk costs. See if anybody in the nobody's really written anything in the chat. Sunk costs, real quick. Anybody? Right. Net effects. $3 million equals sunk cost. They're never going to recover that. They're going to fire that company, and they wasted $3 million. Wouldn't you like to have just a little bit of that, right? Somebody just made this decision, didn't do anything with it, and just $3 million just flew away. All right, so that's enough for today. And we will take this up when we come back after spring break. And what we'll do on the week after spring break is I will be here, but I will not be lecturing. I'll be here and we can do a review if you want to just come in for a review for the exam. So I'll be here, but I won't have any lecture or anything planned. We'll just talk about whatever you need to talk about, okay? And then we go from there. So have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a wonderful spring break. Get some rest. Think about these things if you can. If not, forget about these things for a little while and then pick them back up when you return next week. Thank you guys so much.